This is a show that literally myself and Jim Johnson have been trying to have for probably about 6 months now. The idea has come up, but we've had so much good content. We've kept pushing it back. And now today we get to talk at continuing conversations about if you want to run your Star Trek Adventures game, but you're not playing Starfleet or you're not playing Klingons, then what do you play? We brought the experts on board to talk about that in this week's continuing conversation. I'm Michael Dismuke, a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site, of course, for Star Trek Adventures and Captain's Log. In addition to being the lead writer on Captain's Log and a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, I almost said comic books. One day I'll be doing Star Trek comic books. Until then, Jim Johnson.
Okay, get myself off mute. Hey, everybody, I'm Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modifius Entertainment, and co-host on this here show of these many 2 years plus, 130 odd episodes plus, moving on. Always got something to talk about for Star Trek Adventures and Star Trek. Super excited to be co-host on this show with Michael, and we are really excited to have this show tonight talking about non-Federation, non-Klingon campaigns. So see, there's such a wide breadth of possibilities out there in the Star Trek universe now that really anything's possible. Anything you can imagine, you can put on the game table and play with your friends and have fun. So we got two great guests tonight. So I'll introduce them both and then have them introduce themselves. And we have one newcomer and one veteran. So Wayne, I'll go with you first. As you introduce yourself, please try to fold in what your favorite series is, Star Trek series, and your favorite Star Trek character, if you can narrow it down to one.
Hi, I'm Wayne Twitchell. What was it now I'm supposed to do? My credentials? I'm sorry. I'm a person that works on our streaming channel called Architects of Fate. And apparently Monday nights is Star Trek nights and Friday nights is Star Trek nights on Architects of Fate. And we have been just trying to keep things rolling and not play a game that's Dungeons and Dragons, and also play a game that is relentlessly positive, where all the players tend to be pulling on the same end of the rope, because it really makes things a lot nicer at the table for me. And I like players who like doing that. And for favorite series is literally whichever one is in front of me at the moment. We do a thing, I can plug it later on Fridays, called Cookie Trek, where all of Star Trek is invited. And there is no bad Star Trek, and it is a lot of fun. And as for favorite characters, I think it's Ortegas, because she flies the ship. She is the most deeply developed Star Trek character. They've done so much with her. I'm being so sarcastic, but I'm prepared for her to be my favorite.
I was like, did I miss something?
No, you did not. This is a taste of what you'll get if you show up on our channel. But no, she's... Actually, my favorite characters are the ones that are in the back, because they're in the scene. Like Nichelle Nichols was right there. You didn't get spotlight, but you could look, and she was absolutely involved. It was ready to go. She's actually a great example of how I hope a good player is, and what I hope to do to make sure that players are brought in whenever things aren't necessarily running for them right at the moment. So anyway, I love that. That's a little bit of me. All right.
That's great stuff. Thanks, Wayne. Really appreciate it. And then our second guest probably needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Connor, please introduce yourself. Tell us all about the great work that you do and what brings you to us tonight.
Hey, everybody. My name is Connor. My writing name, Jonathan Connor Self, pronouns he, him. I am a therapist by day and a content creator. Most of my releases have been for that dragon game. But there are opportunities on the horizon to expand that, thankfully. I also am the president of Dance Summit Charities. We're a 501c3. We raise money for great local causes and do a lot of outreach and education efforts. We've got a lot of really cool events planned where we're going to be meeting gamers and talking to them about a lot of things, everything from health and wellness to making a bigger table to just telling a better story. So we've got that all the while. Like I said, we're just raising money for great causes. We've been able to cut checks for a local senior center this year, over $12,000 in funding raised. So that's huge. We've tried to give back for years, and 2024 is no exception. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but anyone who's listened a couple of weeks back, we talked about the con out there, D8 Summit. I bragged about it. It's definitely one worth to go to. The most hospitable con I've ever been to. It was so fun. 3 days of fun. I was able to be there. So glad to have you, Connor. And now let's go ahead and talk about why we invited you two particular people to come on the show, because I found out from Connor on one of our last interviews, Jim. Remember, he spoke about running a game that had nothing to do with Starfleet or Klingons as lead characters. And then Wayne, through social media, through Discord, basically I put the question out there and I jaw dropped. It's like, oh, wow, that sounds like a cool game too. So Wayne, since you're a first time guest on here, tell us a little bit about your game. Give us a summary of the non-Starfleet, non-Klingon game that you run.
We did one because it was the most ridiculous thing we could think of, but it was the one that has the most on-screen source material, which is the Ferengi.
Woohoo!
Because you just don't want to be a saint all the time. Okay. That's just the way it goes. So what we did was, in a fit of hubris, I'm running a Bajor Rising game, which is a little bit of an off the books, but still a Starfleet game. And I said, okay, well, I can just take on a whole new game. And I went with the Ferengi game, and it is called Back in Business. And so every episode is titled after a rule of acquisition. And whether or not the players decide to follow that advice that I'm trying to point them toward with it is up to them. But yeah, it's interesting. We actually have one of our lead characters has never watched Star Trek before.
Oh, wow.
And based on his play, I don't know if he followed the reading list. he kind of read things, which was cool because the first night, he did a great thing because the whole table is very yes and it's not like I don't want to sound bad, but it's not true role playing at the table because we are putting on a bit of a show. So it's like kind of make it fun to watch and make each other laugh.
I think that's the definition of true role playing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I meet people that sometimes go, well, it needs to be grim. I meet people who want it to be grim, and I can't rock that. But he decided to name his Ferengi captain Cash Dash, and he learned Ferengi. He learned Federation Standard with a Texas accent. Those were the tapes. That was his audiobook. And so the guy just is a Southern drawl on a Ferengi going, well, I think the rule of acquisition number 1 clearly states, and he just off he goes. And it's very laid back for a Ferengi. And then he's got
some of that umak.
Yeah, he said, yeah, we have to be careful of that because the era. Also, the funny thing is the player, when you read something and don't hear it, what's the name of the Ferengi homeworld, everyone?
Ferenginar.
He called it Ferengar. And so we've decided that's the second planet in the Ferengi Alliance that is.
Thank you. Roll with it.
That is in a copyright dispute with Ferenginar, and the ship is under the mortgage of the First Bank of Ferengar. So we did take it and run with it. We didn't embarrass him. People in chat spotted it. We all spotted it. The people in chat went, "Oh, is that like the twin planet?" And we all went, "Yes."
I love that. Cool. So that gives us the framework for that one. And Connor, tell us about yours too.
So on Start Playing, I put together a game called Artifact Hunters, and ties into the first and second seasons of Picard, as well as some of the elements from Next Gen and from Lower Decks. And so the heroes in the adventure, the protagonists, are Federation citizens. They're not members of Starfleet. They don't operate on a Starfleet vessel or have any sort of Starfleet registry. And they are hired by people to do heists. They steal things and repatriate them. The organization that they work for in particular, their objective is to repatriate things that were taken perhaps unfairly or unjustly. And so it is it's a group of honorable thieves. The first season, they worked with a patron who they learned later was Jill Ora. Jill Ora was if you go all the way back to Four Lights, the daughter of the Gull, who was told that humans don't love their children the way Cardassians love their children. So her name is Jill Ora, and Jill Ora gained her father's love for Cardassian history and artifacts, and pushed forward 30 years. She works for a university on Cardassia Prime, and she's trying to gather back the things that were unfairly or unjustly taken, stolen, sold from Cardassia to fund the war effort against the Bajorans.
Wow. I don't know about you, Jim, but I want to play in both these games, don't you?
I mean, these are great. I was gonna pepper Wayne with questions about his Ferengi game, and now I can pepper Connor about questions about his Artifact Hunter game. It's like, this is so cool because at this point, Star Trek is almost 60 years old, and after 11 series and 13 movies, there's just a gigantic tapestry of possible stories that you can tell within the franchise that have nothing to do with Starfleet, nothing to do with the Klingons, nothing to do with the Romulans even, and you can pull in these I don't want to say secondary species, but like the species that haven't been quite as prominent in the series, but and plus there's such a wealth of secondary canon now in terms of the novels and the nonfiction books and the comic books and the video games and the RPGs even. Like I know especially Last Unicorn Games and FASA, I think more so Last Unicorn Games, came out with a couple supplements that really dug deep into the Vulcans and the Andorians and the Romulans. And I think there's just such a wealth of material now. And Wayne, I'm super excited to hear about the Ferengi game, because I was going to ask you, how are you playing? Are you playing on Discord or like Roll20 or something? And so there's that question.
Oh, is that my cue?
Yeah. Are you playing on Discord or Roll20, or how are you playing?
We're streaming on. We're literally playing on Skype.
Oh, okay.
And this is embarrassing. We're playing on Skype because it's got the NDI hook.
Yeah.
So that we can balance everybody's audio for broadcast, because it's a broadcast. And I use Google Docs. So I give a PowerPoint presentation for my game, and we just honor roll the dice.
I love it.
Because, and I got I just edit momentum up on the screen. And I don't have the technical wherewithal to figure out Roll20, which is weird. I work in IT and I'm not able to deal with Roll20.
So I have to ask, Wayne, you mentioned your group are very much yes and type of a group. Just out of curiosity, is your group also full of method actors? Like, are you actually doing the Ferengi voices while you're playing the game? Like, do you go that far into it?
It depends on the minute, because a few of the players, when they get an accent rolling, that just helps them get into character. They'll come and go out of accent, so it's not all in character all the time. We do have when we try and or be conscious of being meta. We've got the goofy hand signal, which is like, you just go, well, it's meta now. And that way you can break out into a rules question or something like that.
Yeah.
And we have one of the Ferengi is trying to sell illegal steroids. And that's why he's on the run from the Orion Syndicate right now. Everybody had to come with a backstory of why are you running? And so he breaks into an Arnold Schwarzenegger deal. So we have a really jacked Ferengi who is like 4'2", but his lobes have shrunk.
That's so good.
He gets to that point in the sales pitch and suddenly people aren't interested anymore. So he's not a great Ferengi salesman. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's great. I was just curious because I know that I met up with my regular group a couple of weeks ago just to touch base, and we somehow the conversation turned towards Star Trek, as it always does, and somehow the conversation turned into the four of us riffing back and forth about playing a Ferengi game, and like we all dropped into the Ferengi voice and we were just going back and forth about it, and I was like, oh man, this could be really fun for like a one shot or something. So I was just curious to actually hear it firsthand from somebody who's running a Ferengi campaign.
I will confess that we are desperate for any attention that we can get at our channel, like all channels. So
we'll have you promote it. So we'll have you promote it here and promote it again at the end.
What we'll say is the way the SN works is if someone wants to simply say, I'd like to be in for an afternoon or one episode, we will do that. So just contact me and go, okay, enjoy it. You don't have to know a damn thing about what shows up. I think it's better to know that you're not in a movie, a lot like, what was it? Who played Jor-El in Superman?
No, I don't know.
Old Jor-El.
You're talking DC, we're Marvel people here.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that.
So let me ask a question over Connor. Connor, I want to ask a question to start with, and then Wayne, pick up on it. Talking about the storytelling dynamics, how does the absence of Starfleet and Klingon characters as the lead influence the storytelling in your game? Would you say, how's it a little bit different? Can you give examples of how this has led to like different plot developments or conflicts?
Well, so at the heart of Star Trek is a moral play. And that exists across all the series. It's part of the reason why the series has been able to be so positive, is because there's that, because the characters, despite very disparate maybe backgrounds, upbringings, share the same fundamental ideals. They can come together and move forward. For your typical Star Trek, it might be the spirit of exploration, or the importance of defending family if you're going DS9, right? But in each series, they come together, and you have those core tenets. You've got the prime directive, you've got the directive to explore, to document, to dialogue. So all of those things exist. They're all built into the fabric of Star Trek and most people's games. When you're building a game that isn't Starfleet, or a game that isn't Klingon, because Klingon games also have a core of values that are shared, it really allows the players to come up with their own shared values. What unites you as a group? What do you all believe in? What do you all feel is worth fighting for? How do you accomplish these things? Like, not only like what's worth fighting for in the end, what could potentially be worth dying for.
Well, so and Wayne mentioned that they go by the Ferengi rules of acquisition, which is kind of equal to the Prime Directive. On yours, what do you have STA pretty much gives you a general mission directive that kind of carries through many of the stories? Do you have something like that also?
Yeah, for them, the entire story is learning. For my players, at least, the entire story was learning how to jive a general belief with the harsh realities of the situation they find themselves in. They believe that items that are taken unfairly should go back to the original owners. And so they're like, we will absolutely get paid to do this work. We believe it's good work. We will take the money because, Federation, if you're not on Earth, y'all, you still use credits. So you still have your gold press platinum when you're away from the planet Earth. So they're like, we need the money, but at the same time, we believe this is work worth doing. And then that's when you throw in the things where it's like, okay, we believe that this is true, but what are we working for here?
I actually like that, Jim. That's a concept. This is a topic we're exploring fresh. We haven't talked about this before. And I was thinking in any story, because we talk a lot about storytelling here, whether it's Ocean's 11 or whether, it's Star Wars, that there has to be something that brings all these disparate characters together. So that sounds like a session zero conversation to me, is you're going to say, maybe initially we don't agree, but we're all going to mesh and agree to this story that we believe in that directive in a sense, no matter what that could be. Right.
Yeah. And then allowing them to find where that is for themselves, and even argue about it. Because a lot of the sessions have come down to strong disagreement as to what the moral or ethical thing to do in any situation is. You watch DS9. I'm a huge fan of DS9. I think a lot of your listeners are as well. And DS9 did somewhat, but there were so many Cardassian characters that were so easy to hate that a lot of times people forgot all the Cardassian characters that you could love. And there's so many, like you can't reduce a group of people to the couple dozen characters that have come and gone over the 7-year run of the show. So it's like, okay, well, we know that the Cardassians did awful things to the Bajorans. We know that's true. It most certainly was not every Cardassian making those decisions, nor was it every Cardassian undertaking those horrible actions. And to what right do Cardassians have to their own history and culture? Do they deserve to maintain and keep that? And so, yeah. Oh, wow. So many arguments, and they were wonderful. I just loved sitting there as a GM and just watching it happen and just keeping my mouth shut. It was great.
It's interesting. We're talking two levels here. We're talking character development and world building. I don't know which we should talk about first. I think we should talk about world building first, because how do you approach, Wayne, you cracked me up when you said you built a double planet, based off a player mispronouncing Ferenginar. Yep. So how do you approach world building for settings that don't revolve around these familiar Starfleet and Klingon ideas?
It is for us, it's like, as the story, as the adventure needs it, or as the setup needs it, I'm really trying to get them to go to the Delta Quadrant, and they have gone everywhere but the Delta Quadrant right now. So this is making me very frustrated. It's like Grand Nagus Rom has sent them to the Delta Quadrant. He's put bounties on the people. They have bounties on their heads. There's everything, and they're bound and determined not to go where I want them. But we do tend to take stuff out of memory alpha, memory beta, and then details or other things. It's kind of what we need. But I know that people will derail things, but they'll also will ask around the table, hey, there's a barkeeper here. Tell me 3 things about the barkeeper that are of interest to you, or you want to, or we throw it to the chat, and the chat is very merciless and capricious. So we got our own little Trelane and Q routine going back there in the chat. So they can literally they can change the course of an adventure by introducing a new character, removing another character. We did have Chancellor Galron show up because chat summoned him, and suddenly Galron shows up in a shuttle with a bunch of octogenarian Klingons on the way to a retirement planet. Okay, we got to deal with that. that's how we allowed that to happen. It makes for more silly games. We're not. I feel bad because we're sitting here with the Ferengi, which can be very dark, but notably no slavery. So, or so they say. Compared to like the deep moral questions about what is right, what's wrong, who's the British Museum and who's not the British Museum, kind of thing from the Cardassian adventure, because
that's what I thought of. Yeah.
It belongs in a museum. No, not really in a museum. Maybe somebody else wants this instead of the museum.
Yeah.
But for the world building for us, it tends to be as needed for the very immediate story. And I'll have larger themes going on that will be an environment for them to play in, but it won't lock them down.
Right.
Sorry.
And now, Jim, I know that this episode shows up on June 21st, but can we talk a little bit from your perspective about 2E with Star Trek Adventures 2E coming out? Are there going to be more opportunities for world building for non-Starfleet, non-Klingon characters? Is that inherent to the design?
Yeah, I think we've already come out and advertised that. And certainly by the time this show airs, right, we'll have talked about it in blog posts and in the AMA and even in the quick start and some other interviews that we've done. Clearly, I had one of the many design intentions I had from the very beginning of second edition was to expand the scope of the game, right, to not just be Starfleet like the first edition was, because the franchise is now almost twice the size it was 7 years ago, right? Because we've got 5 new series that have come out in the last 7 years. It has expanded massively, even beyond where it was, 50 odd years into it. And if you look at the character species selection in the first core book compared to the second edition, it's very, very different, just because we've added some non-Starfleet species. You've got Klingons, Cardassians, Romulans, Orion, and Ferengi right there in the core book, which hopefully, we are explicit in the core book, but we are also implicitly saying, look, Star Trek is a really big franchise. It's a really big universe. You can do literally anything you want with it. We only had so much space in the core book to drop in some new species. So we went with these 5. And then, over time, I'm sure we'll do more. But even with first edition, we've got 80, 90 playable character species at this point, maybe more. I've lost track. But the intention was very much somebody like Wayne or like Connor or anybody else could pick up that new core book and say, you know what? I don't want to play Starfleet. I want to play Orion scientists doing science and exploring the universe. Or I want to play a mixed crew of Orions and Cardassians and Ferengi going off and doing whatever adventures they want to do, in between the lines, in between the borders or whatever. And I'm really curious to see how it hits fandom, because I don't know exactly what to expect. I think it'll be fine, just because that's where we've been for the last 7 years with the game. And now we're just kind of like, cementing it into the core experience and moving on from there. You'll see, there's non-Starfleet space frames in the core book. There are non-Starfleet space frames in the toolkit that'll be coming out, and I'm sure we'll be doing more over time, especially because one of the things we didn't get a chance to do in first edition, really, because there just wasn't enough publishing slots year by year, right? We didn't get an opportunity to do an independence like / merchants kind of supplement. And there's so many, we've seen tons of examples on screen of independent ships, merchant ships, traders, smugglers, all kinds of cool space frames and vehicles and stuff. I'd love to figure out a way to get those into the game so people can start using that stuff, right? So it's just, got to figure out how that fits and works. But yeah, absolutely. The intention from the very beginning of second edition was to expand the scope of the game outside of Starfleet. And I think to some degree I was actually inspired by the Decipher version of the game, the Decipher Star Trek RPG that came out in the early 2000s. Their core book had some non-Federation species in it, right? Partly because it was, you had DS9 and Voyager, you have some non-Federation species very present in those series. But I felt like the Decipher game, just starting out, you could play a non-Starfleet game right off the back with that player's guide, and I felt it was important to expand STA in that direction too.
Well, that's why I put the picture behind me. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I have, 7 of 9, 7 over here who represents the Fenris Rangers, where if you wanted to play more of a Star Wars, Firefly level game, you could say, I'm not even introducing the Federation or Klingons into this, and we're just bounty hunters on the border of this collapsing empire. Let the players go yes and with that. And then I have Hugh on the other side, who's an XB. You may have people who want to play more of a tech action game. And imagine if you have 5 XB exploring the universe, who are freed from the Borg, just doing whatever, meeting new races. So I just think that, I know my next game is going to be a non-Starfleet game, even if I just run it for 3 episodes. I just want the feel of it, and to develop characters where you don't have canon weighing them down, because I think that is a obstacle to a lot of new players, is the fear of canon. So instead, saying, no, we're going to be playing a sci-fi game. Here are the kind of characters. Put ourselves in the universe somewhere, use the 2D20 roll system and just go at it, and maybe slowly introduce the Federation or Klingons to them a little bit, pique their curiosity. And then those are some options you could do.
Yeah. And I was actually going to, before I ask the question, Wayne, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
I was going to yes and something with your explorers. They have impulse engines. They're barely making it out to the next star. They've got, O'Neill cylinders, whatever. Then a freaking Constitution class starship just rolls up and says, "Hi, you just developed warp drive. How are you?" And that could be, anyway, sorry, I'll go back to.
No, that's epic. I love riffing. We're here to riff. So good job.
Yeah. So, Michael, you raised a good point, and that was going to be one of the 2 questions I jotted down as we were talking. One of the 2 questions I have for Wayne and for Connor is exactly what you're alluding to, Michael, where you were saying, "Oh, we're going to play a sci-fi game with the 2D20 system." So my question is, this isn't a generic sci-fi game, right? It's Star Trek, and Star Trek doesn't mean Federation Starfleet. It doesn't have to mean Federation Starfleet. It can mean everything, right? But it's still Star Trek. For whatever definition of Star Trek is to your group of players, right? It could mean values, it could mean pew pew, it could mean any number of things, right? So I guess my question for both Wayne and Connor then is, you're playing these very non-Starfleet, non-Klingon type of games. What do you do, or what have you done to make the game still be a Star Trek game, even though you're not doing the traditional, Star Trek kind of thing? What makes it Star Trek that you are playing it with, instead of some other game system that could probably do it just as well?
You go first, Connor, because I got questionable answers.
I've got questions and answers. So to make it feel like Star Trek, I try to use touchstones, things that players might recognize from the shows, characters, events, discrete items or locations. So very early on, I had the group got together, and they got together at the amusement park at Bozeman. And they were at the amusement park in Bozeman when the Borg technovirus took over the Federation. And so they're at the amusement park with the rides, the kids, the really bad food, everything that you saw in Lower Decks. Meanwhile, all the ensigns all of a sudden are taken over by the Borg virus, and are shooting at people and causing destruction. It was hilarious. But trying to pull these little snippets out of the series, the things that they like, Jalora being their benefactor, the museum ships that pretty much, I guess, get free run to go around Federation space, even though they do unquestionable, they do very questionable things. Next Generation, one of the museum ships abducted Data. And this ship is just going around Federation space, minding its own business, because I'm guessing he's wealthy and can just get away with whatever he wants, even inside of Federation space. Like, what sort of message does that send? There's a lot of that. So I try to use those touchstones there. So they're like, oh yeah, I remember that from that show, or I remember that from that scenario, even if they just see it or observe it and just keep going.
Great, thank you. And Wayne, same question for you.
So yeah, well, I'm immediately handicapped by, I've got 3 players, which is why I'm saying there's an extra chair, and I have someone dying of consumption over there. All right, so he's fine. So I'm a bit handicapped because I have somebody who's never watched Star Trek, and then I've got another person who is now pasting Efrosian mustaches on himself and does all the voices and knows way more trivia. And I'll go and he'll bring me back 4 pages of backstory, how his great grandfather was president of the Federation, and touches on it all the time. So I'm blessed with people with knowledge. But for the Ferengi one, it was more of a theme because there's not. I've got one guy who's just going to supply all the touchstones I need. But the big one for me is there's an overall sense of optimism that I had to bring in. And for the Ferengi, it's curiosity and the sense of exploration. Like, because I thought, okay, this can turn into Firefly, or this can turn into a Traveler game, which is, ancient high geek, right? And so it really is. The Ferengi are they're a lot like humans, but better. And they're intensely curious. I've pushed them into Nagus Rom's universe, and we have not yet explored the delightful tension between the old school Ferengi, who were not on board with the reforms of slightly less greed and lighten up on the misogyny and pockets for everyone. Those are just the changes in the society. We haven't really rolled into those like I really want to. But yeah, I've set up that tension between the old and the new ways. The new ways are a lot more taking advantage of the Ferengi's natural instinct to be curious, to be overall positive, because it's more profitable to be positive than it is to be negative. How about you run a nature preserve instead of taking these animals' pelts, that kind of a thing. And that's, that for me, that's the Star Trek way too, is like overall, can you come together in common cause? Can you do all these things? Anyway.
That reminds me of that the 2 Ferengi rules of acquisition. War is profitable, and the next one is peace is profitable.
Yeah, war is good for peace. And when in doubt, declare peace. It confuses your enemies.
Exactly.
These are all the bits. Yeah, they're pretty good.
Can I ask you, just curious about your player who is not familiar with Star Trek, because they've been playing the game though, do they now peek into Ferengi based episodes out of curiosity?
I have seen no evidence of this in his play.
Not even in secret under their covers at night.
He's a pretty busy guy, so I'm lucky I got him for what I got him for. But I don't know. But he does. He did make a study of the rules, the ones that he could find. I mean, I can see him when he's playing. It's like, whoop, there's a set of rules right there. He did watch a couple of episodes. He's not deep diving, but he definitely understands. And he's an actor, of course. They all are, but he's very much on the idea of, okay, I want to trade. I got it. I'm a merchant. I'm doing a thing. I got funny ears, and I'm going to let. And he's also already had his was it your sudden yet inevitable betrayal has happened. First episode, his second in command turned him into his creditors and had a bunch of Nausicaans come on board to take over the ship.
Fine.
This was our inciting event for them running.
Let's do a little riff real quick. I want to do this because we talked about yours. I want to kind of give you guys time to bake in. I'm going to ask this question since we do all watch Star Trek. If you could go back into any Star Trek, any episode, and find characters that are non-Starfleet or non-Klingon and pick them up and play them, who would you want to see? I know mine. I'll go mine to give you all time to kind of bake and think about this. Mine would be the think tank from Voyager. So you had those 5 characters that kidnapped 7 of 9, played by Jason Alexander as the leader. And they were, I put them up on continuing missions. I did a little player book. So anybody who's watching this and wants to see their stats, I went ahead and did a book up on continuing missions about them. And that would be probably the one I'd want to do eventually is let's be the think tank, be super smart, and then throw in a little lower decks comedy. It's like, okay, you think you're that smart? There's problems that all the IQ in the world cannot solve. So I would probably go with the think tank since they were very well developed in one episode too. And they were so alien and obscure, the players could really take them in new directions. Let's see who's next. I'll give it to Jim because I know you're a huge Trek aficionado to buy the others a little bit more time and then you could pass it.
Oh gosh. I don't remember that episode of Voyager. I'm going to go back and watch it.
Oh, it's classic.
But two thoughts immediately came to mind. The first one, I guess, is similar to yours, where there were 2 episodes of DS9 where there were a group of genetically enhanced beings that came to the station to help Bashir. To interact with Bashir. One of them was Jack and Serena, and I forget the other two's names. They were really super incredibly smart characters, right? Like savants, and they had worked out the whole Dominion plan, and they were like watching the Dominion recordings, and they're like, oh, this guy's lying, they're planning on attacking this. I would love to take those 4 characters into a campaign and just see what kind of shenanigans they get into, right? With literally they could do literally anything, right? They could get involved in the temporal Cold War, they could go back in time, they can do anything, right? But honestly, there was an episode, what the heck was it? It was a DS9 episode, or I'm sorry, it was the Next Gen episode. It must have been a 2-parter. There was an episode where Riker is like undercover, and he's trying to do some research on kind of like the black market. And there was a female keyboard
4 hands,
piano player
with 4 arms.
I remember
she knew everybody, and she was like tied into everything. And I was like, oh, that would be an awesome character because she's got like all the connects, and she could like be the mover. Who knows, right? She could have a whole huge backstory. But I was like, oh, that it was only a bit part in one episode for like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. But like, that's the character I'd want to play just because I could get involved in literally anything, right? Being the person who has intel, like, and you're a knowledge broker. You're not selling stuff. You're not selling drugs. You're not selling weapons. You're selling information, and that is the biggest, most powerful commodity, right? That's the character I would want to play.
Oh, I love that, especially if she's dishing out jobs to the. I love that.
And plus, you get to sing on the side too. You get the little shtick on the side to sing while you're role playing.
Yeah, she knew Klingon opera. Remember, she was jamming to Klingon opera. She was cool. All right, Connor, what about you? What would you pick?
There are so many things where they've bumped up into Star Trek series where I'd like to see a little bit more. Civilizations like the Sinkethi. But I think if I were to I just want to explore something in Trek that I think is really ripe for storytelling opportunity, I would choose the Mirror Universe. I think that you could turn enough of what people understand to be Star Trek on its ear so that it would feel fresh even to people who are really engaged in the Star Trek series. But you could also sort of start over for people who don't have a strong background in it. They could learn the setting along with the people who've been at it for a while. So I think that's kind of where I might go.
I love that. And for those players who are a little bit more murder hobo,
or not. It's a little bit more. It's a lot more grimdark than your typical Trek. sort of storyline is, but not everybody is that way. So you just the rebels from Discovery are a good example, right? The people who are just trying to save, to save their plucky alliance of people from the humans.
Yeah. Wayne, what's your pick?
I was going to say like the what's it called? In the Mirror Universe, the other thing we forget is they're very political, which is why Lorca was like, damn it. He was a highly political. If you don't want a murder hobo game, but you have like high politics and high stakes crap. So anyway, I think I got to use one C word so that we're still under PG-13. So I was going to be a weenie and say I'd like to play Guinan because she's non-Starfleet and can do everything, but that's kind of the easy choice. I go with Jillian from the one with the whales.
Ooh, nice.
Because theoretically she can go, she came forward. It's very clear that it was not happening with Admiral Kirk. And for her, the whole universe is new. The whole environment is new. She gets to go, are you telling me, or Mark Twain? Those are my two. You just tell me that's not how it is anymore. There's money for everybody. I don't have to worry about funding or whatever. She's covered in other stories and everything. They follow her along, but I kind of like her as a person who could go anywhere and gets to relearn a bunch of things.
I like that. I would probably, even if I had kids that wanted to learn to play Star Trek, I may make it a cetacean, like going to get George and Gracie to their planet and discovering this planet of water and just play whales and dolphins and maybe create a little bit more My Little Pony-ish kind of 2D20 thing going on there. I could see that. And Jillian could just be their mentor, kind of helping them out.
Oh yeah, no. And the part of it is they kind of, the nice part about Trek is they kind of leave everything hovering like the phaser lock, right? You don't lock the phaser until the last minute. Everything's kind of gel until you collapse it onto a story that you need to tell. Because it's like, I don't know if, we didn't know dolphins really had complex sapience like we thought. And apparently Matt and Kimu locked that down. Also with that they're frequent visitors to HR. Apparently.
I love episodes like this. I love riffing, and it makes me sad a little bit that Simon & Schuster doesn't do the Strange New Worlds short story contest anymore, because that's a great place to do some canon riffs. Because like you were talking, Wayne, I was like, oh yeah, Dr. Jillian Taylor is present in the setting, and wouldn't it be a hoot, like in that Next Gen episode? It must have been season 1, season 2, where they find the 3 humans in cryo, and they thaw them out, and they're like all my investments are gone now. I'm really pissed off, right? And Jillian Taylor by that point would probably be in her 80s or 90s. I'd have to look at the time frame, but she could be a character who could like meet them and say, hey, you are now in the 24th century. Here's how I can help you integrate. And then they can go on some random adventure, it's like that story. Cause like, it's all canon now. That would be just so much fun to do something different that has nothing to do with, Starfleet.
Oh, also, are you talking about the man who finally brokered peace and formed an understanding between the Federation and the Ferengi? Because that's where I got him pegged. Is he was the only one. He was the one that made the Ferengi understand that humans actually knew what they were talking about. So
I'm a big proponent to. I don't know you all know the Love Boat, right? And it amazed me that you could get so much action and adventure and story out of the Love Boat every week. And so why not a pleasure cruiser? There's pleasure freighters going throughout the Federation. So imagine if you were the crew commanding you're the Love Boat in space, and what kind of adventures could you have contained on a pleasure freighter, picking up passengers and stuff like that? Like that would be a really fun game to play too.
Yeah, and actually, that just talking about pleasure cruises and that kind of thing. This was the other question I had for the both of you, just to riff a little bit and just to talk about your campaigns. Obviously, a Starfleet game or a Klingon game, I guess, or even a Romulan game, like there's some implicit understandings that between episodes any damage to your ship is going to be repaired, right? Because you got a star base, you got facilities, you got the means baked into the setting that you don't really have to worry about that kind of stuff. You have replicators, so literally anything you want you can get within reason, right? But if you're playing a non-Starfleet game or a non-Klingon game or a non-Federation game or a non-Romulan game, how are you handling money? Because money is ill-defined in the setting as it is. And how are you handling like just basic upkeep of your crew and your ship and stuff? And I'm thinking a little bit about Star Wars, right? Because like I remember like 99.9% of the Star Wars RPGs I ever played, we were always cash poor, and we were always trying to figure out like, okay, what's the next score in order for us to keep our ship working? Because otherwise we're going to be stranded on this stupid dirt ball of a planet with nothing to do. And where's the adventure in that, right? That's boring. And we want to be soaring the stars and doing stuff. So like, have you had to handle like the money question in your games? And if so, how did you handle it? And if not, did you just skirt it aside?
I want to say, Wayne, you're running a game with Ferengi, like money is like your thing. In the story that we tell, I always keep money to the back. It's assumed that you're working for it. It's assumed that there's never enough. So you're always trying to take new jobs and let that be a motivator. But I don't really deal with the money aspect too much of it, because that's not the kind of game that I'm trying to tell. I'm not trying to tell a game of resource management. There are players who would love to play that game, right? But in my campaign, I'm less focused on resource management and more focused on squaring values and interpersonal relationships.
Dead air.
I will say on Architects of Fate, we are not afraid of dead air. That's just because I am totally terrible at OBS. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, we've been broadcasting for 5 seconds. But no, I will say, Connor, for yours, though, you do have scarcity, which does come into, money's really just a substitute for scarcity. And yeah, as long as the players know, this would be easy to solve if we just had an Adian pulse deflector. But we can't lay our hands on one because of, the Nausicaans acting up in the quadrant. So now we got to go make do with a busted ship and a new trait on it, that kind of thing.
I love that. Talk about the trait real quick. I love that you said we just got off of a show about traits, but let's emphasize that again. What do you mean that you toss a trait onto it?
Well, I may have played second edition before second edition was cool. But I just said, okay, I'm just going to stick a label on you. And you're broken, you are, full of radiation. So basically anything that in my brain, you've got a block of numbers, and then you've got like things that are actionable that will impact play. And so we'll put traits on there.
There you go. Just emphasizing from last week, everyone.
Yeah. We tend to use the focuses as we don't tend to use the focus. We tend to use the values as catchphrases. So I really just say, those are your catchphrases, that when a new player comes in, those are your catchphrases. Win it out, look at your sheet. That's what's going to happen to you at any minute of the day. But for us, we, how is money going to work, Mr. Second Edition? Let's expand out the universe, because we'd like to know. If you can give us a definitive canonical thing about what a brick is worth, I will doff my hat to you, sir.
I got an idea. I actually have an idea. You answered it already, Wayne, because basically at any point in an adventure, their finances is a trait. Broke.
Yes.
Enough for this, or mega rich. And they may have to create an advantage through an adventure, maybe through an extended task to get enough money to buy that deflector. So I would actually deal with money as a trait, Jim.
Yeah, money. I think and that's kind of how, believe it or not, that's how we're doing it. However, the captain has paywalled the entire ship. So the crew has to, we decided right off the bat we weren't going to keep track of bits and bobs. But it was going to be a tedious thing. It wasn't going to be breaking. Somebody had a whip that they got as a souvenir from their great grandfather because he loved the Ferengi whips. And he says, yeah, I got the special one that puts latinum in it. So you have to feed it a strip of latinum to charge it. Like the captain charges to use the elevator, but you can take the stairs. So I think we've all worked at places like that.
Love it.
Yeah, that's ours. I mean, we looked around. What was the question? We were
asking. No, money. That was the question. It was about how you deal with that.
Yeah. And right now they are literally playing with a mortgage. So they're trying to make a deal or a thing, and I'm using the deal to involve them in mysteries. Right now they're on a mystery planet and they're trying to buy fruit, which may or may not be botanically contaminated by a plague. Yeah. But that's not stopping the captain.
So Jim, continuing the conversation from we had last week, you could be broke 1, broke 2, broke 3. The intensity of that trait in 2E can be heavier. So you actually have to work your way out of it. So each episode could be a back and forth. I think about the Federation Klingon War Tactical Campaign, progression points, back and forth campaign points can be kind of symbolic of gaining and losing resources, even if you're playing on the Federation Klingon War scale.
Yeah, absolutely. It just dawned on me that a small lobed could be a trait for a character, and how sad would that be for a Ferengi, right?
it is, and it has the effect intended.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting to hear your perspectives, because I think I've always thought about trying to avoid Star Trek games becoming resource management games, because I'm sure we all have stories about our D&D games turning into Monty Hall and the characters literally looting every body possible so they could go sell the stuff at the general store for a couple silver, a couple of gold, just because when you're a low level character you're trying to scrape by, trying to get enough to just get the basics right, if that's the kind of game you want to play. And I've never wanted a Starfleet or a Star Trek game to go down into the weeds where like, oh yeah, I'm running a freighter from DS9 to Bajor, and I'm low on fuel. How am I going to even make this trip? It's like, okay, now we're doing economics. Pull out the spreadsheets. Pull out. This is not the game we want to play, right? But interesting that you're just kind of like not focusing on it. But I love the idea. Of wealth being a trait that you can manipulate and be well-heeled 2, or super wealthy 3, or poor.
Yeah, especially since you have foci and talents that could still benefit you in those kind of things. Like if your extended task is to gain wealth or something, like a talent around that, like business dealings, or if you have business finance, spreadsheets could be a thing. Like, because that's what Quark did when he married that Klingon. Remember, he fixed all her spreadsheets and brought the wealth back to the family. So I could like really see. I'm doing that from now on. I'm sold, Wayne. Sold. That's how I'm going to manage my non-Federation, non-Klingon game. All right, you have any more questions, Jim? Or are we going to one more round on tips and tricks?
No, I mean, I think this has been really useful. I think I'm
ready to go.
I think there's more episodes like this we could do in the future about it. But I mean, really, we could even get into the weeds on Connor's campaign about artifacts, because Star Trek has shown plenty of ancient civilizations, crazy, wild, amazing artifacts that are out there in the universe just waiting to be picked up. Mm-hmm. And gosh, there's no shortage of campaigns you could run around that. Like I've always had a secret desire to run a post-Dominion War like mini campaign of a mix of Bajorans and Cardassians going out to look for all the missing orbs that the Cardassians liberated from Bajor and now have been lost due to the war, scattered all over the Alpha Quadrant, and then they're going to go off and try to reclaim them.
Yeah, indeed. I'm ready to go for my campaign. And now I think in continuing missions, we actually need to have a list of artifacts that have been shown up in Star Trek. I feel like we leave this roll table of artifacts that you could pursue in where they last were seen or something. That would be cool.
As a minor thing, I think this might be going into Connor's world a bit. The artifact had darn well better represent a moral question. I'm thinking Mr. Psychic Resonator. I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't find that orb. Or maybe the orb is better where it is, because the orb is where it needs to be. Like whatever that asteroid is that they dealt with in Strange New Worlds, it's where it needs to be. Sorry.
No, that's great.
That's why you're here. It's to riff.
So I've gone through things that are relatively benign, but I've also thrown in things that weren't. One of the artifacts was an intelligent computer. It was designed to predict what an opponent might do in a military conflict. The Cardassians had designed it. It was pretty primitive. 100 years before DS9, was only about 85% effective. And Cardassian culture being Cardassian culture, they thought that, first of all, that wasn't good enough. And secondly, it was like AI. It was given away the work people wanted to do. So they sort of mothballed it and put it in a museum, but it ended up getting out. And they were like, should we be looking for a war computer to return to the Cardassian people? But then it turned out that this item, they were trying to sell it to the Gorn. For the Gorn, an 85% effective at predicting what humanoids do computer is an amazing advance, right? Because the Gorn have a hard time grokking what other humanoids do. So they're like, okay, well, we don't want the Cardassians to have this, but we sure as heck don't want the Gorn to have it. What do we do? And so, that was the big argument episode.
I see such major crossover between your game, Connor, and Wayne's game. I see these characters meeting at some point for some reason. I wish I could see that happen.
If the price is right, that's not a problem. Cash Dash is totally down for whatever pays the mortgage, man. You guys don't care about money. Just give us some of that filthy latinum. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And, I almost feel, now that I said that, and then we'll go around and do our closing, give advice to a GM if they want to do this kind of game. I almost feel that you're building characters that if you ever did go and play back in a Federation Starfleet game, that they could actually meet. Like that to me would blow my mind, that all of a sudden when your players have said, okay, let's put the Ferengis aside for a little bit. You play a couple of Starfleet games, and then for episode 4, they run into Cash Dash and his crew. I think to me, that would give me like chills up my spine. Like, oh my God, this is such a great meetup. So that's cool. All right, let's get some final words of wisdom. If a GM out there is trying to put together one of these games, what you would say, Wayne?
I left myself on mute. Damn it.
You're okay. I hear you.
I was hoping Connor would walk into this. So I would say for me, it's like, listen to your table, especially, and they may not know, or they may halfway through find out that's not really what they wanted to do. So don't be afraid to let them change or redo something or throw a character out. Don't be afraid of that, because that's really important. As a DM or GM, just don't be precious with the story as best you can. Hopefully people are getting stuff out of it, and try and be true to Star Trek and that spirit of cooperation and exploration and diversity and inclusion, and make sure everybody gets something to do that makes a difference every session. Ow. And I hit myself on the table with emphasis. So
emphatic.
I took a point of damage to make my point.
Take a break and you get 2 back in the new system. All right, Connor. You are on mute effectively.
I guess the best advice that I would offer somebody like myself who's trying to help players tell this kind of story, one of the biggest advantages of running a non-Federation, non-Klingon campaign is that it does separate the style of game that you can tell from canon, what's already established. let your players run with the story. Let them create their own world, their own shared perspective, their own culture, their own values, because it's a wide open playground for this campaign style. Whereas you might have a few more rails in some of the others, you can cast aside all the rails and really let the player. So let them go. That's what I did. Tell me what kind of story you want to tell. Let's put this together.
Love it. Love it. Jim, anything before we head off to gratitude?
No, I think I would echo the general consensus here. I would sit the group down, either physically in the same space with a whiteboard, or on Discord or Zoom or like whatever technical medium we use if we're meeting virtually. And literally, I'd spend the first session zero just riffing and saying what excites you about Star Trek. What do you want to do? Assuming that Starfleet and Klingons are off the table, what fires you up, and with the idea, like Wayne was saying, trying to keep it to the generally optimistic, bright colors, teamwork kind of conceit that's present in Star Trek, because that's what Star Trek is at its best, and then just see what they come up with, and then make it happen. Like my job as a game master is to facilitate an awesome experience for those players. And so I will yes and as often as possible, with the implicit understanding that I'm also going to be throwing rocks at their characters as often as possible and getting them into trouble and throwing complications at them and challenging them. But also trying to make sure that they're having a great, fun experience. And, if a couple sessions into it, that's not quite what they wanted, and maybe they wanted to go in a different direction, then I can have another session zero, because as I think Connor, you told us, session zero never ends. You just have another conversation with them and say, okay, here's where we're at, and here's where I'm kind of feeling like you want to go. Yes, no, or do we change it up, and then just go from there and see what happens.
Excellent advice. Good.
What's your advice, Michael?
My advice is just do it. I think honestly, I'm going to steal advice from Wayne, and it's about don't worry about the minutiae, use traits. And that actually is going to be the idea that I borrow from this one. I've never done a non-Starfleet game before, but I plan to make that my next one. So I'll let you know once I have more experience. For gratitude, I'm actually going to give it to someone who wrote a non-Starfleet novel recently, and it was amazing. David Mack wrote Firewall, and I've been dying to hear about the Fenris Rangers. And to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've read a lot of Star Trek novels. This was the first one that I read that was non-Starfleet. And I don't know if there's a lot out there to choose from novelization. So if people send me recommendations if you want to, but my gratitude is going to go, David, for taking that amazing, to me, what I thought was a brave leap into a non-Starfleet novel that is apparently doing very well in sales. And of course, it's my favorite character, Seven. So I would not ever be dissatisfied, I think, with that. All right. So let's go final gratitude, Connor. Then we'll go Wayne, and Jim can close it out.
So for gratitude, I'm going to throw this out. Like you never really know what people are dealing with until they tell you, and you can always be under the assumption it's safe. It's much safer to be under the assumption people are dealing with something. And so for my moment of gratitude, I just want to extend that to all the people in my life who in the last couple of months from the D8 Summit forward have given their time, their energy, and their kindness to each other, and show grace to each other and to me as well. Because I'm sure for many of us out there, it's life affirming. So gratitude to the people who show that kindness out there, wherever you are.
Lead with kindness. That's right. Good job, Wayne.
Yeah, right now, I guess I'm grateful for you guys for this opportunity and for all the people that I've, been able to enjoy time with and, get to share this hobby and Yeah, I just, I don't know. Right now, there's just so many people at this point. I really want to say thanks to the letter carrier that always makes sure there's a dog treat for our dogs every time she drops off a package.
That's so nice.
Which
that's
I think
that's
might be
self-serving too.
I think it might be a very, very like singular example of how it doesn't take much to make the world a better place, and all the people that are doing little tiny things that do mean a lot every day. So that's what I got for right now.
Plug your channel one more time. I want you to plug it one more time.
Well, it's not mine. I'm but a humble
the
person.
channel.
Architects of Fate on Twitch.
Very good. Check it out.
Other places, YouTube.
I've tuned in for a couple episodes. It's been fun.
You stayed for 2? New record. Thanks.
Well, there's another group on there too using a Star Trek Adventures game. That's not the Ferengi game, or is it just your second game? Anyways, there's 2.
There's a Bajor game.
Yeah, so I'm going to tune in for the Ferengi one later because I think that's going to be more hilarious.
Oh, all right. All right, thank you.
Architects of Fate people on Twitch. All right, Jim, close us out.
Yeah, I want to thank Wayne and Connor for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you sharing your perspectives. I just love hearing about what different groups are doing out there in the world with the game and with the franchise and everything. It's just always energizing for me because like I could so easily get stuck in the rut of Starfleet. And it's like no, there's more stuff out there. So I appreciate that. Michael, appreciate you being co-host on the show with me. Thanks so much. Thanks to Jeff for doing all the hard work behind the scenes. That I know that's often unheralded, and but know that you are appreciated every day. Every time you bring out a new episode, I'm like, "Ooh, just up the new episode up!" I'm so excited because that's my Friday jam. Is I always rewatch them because I'm a shameless. I don't know, whatever. But I always appreciate watching the episode just to refresh my memory on what we talked about. Because like some of these episodes we've recorded months ago, and I forgot what we talked about. It's always nice to get a refresher. But so thank you, Jeff. Always appreciated. And thank you to the fans. Of course, can't thank you fans enough. Without the fans responding to the game, buying the game, playing the game, supporting each other, we would not have done a second edition. We would not have done 7 years worth of this game. We would not be having this bright, happy future ahead of us of more cool stuff to come out with. And I wouldn't have all these awesome Twitches and YouTubes and actual plays and stuff to go watch because all you fans inspire me every day with everything that you're creating on Continuing Mission and just with each other. So keep it up. Don't stop. Don't stopping. So thanks for everything that you do. And we'll talk to you all again next week, right? Yeah.
Until next time, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all real soon.